You want to?
Okay, so for those watching, which is, I think, just Stephanie, we don't have a quorum tonight, so this won't be an official meeting of the commission. We won't take action on anything. We won't vote on anything. We won't vote on minutes. But because you all showed up, and I know there's a lot going on with GCET as always, I think that probably we could do a, John could maybe give kind of a
Sure.
update on where we are, where we're going, what we're doing, and kind of see where it goes from there.
Sure. I guess
And just if David does show up, we can call the meeting to order at that point.
Okay. Do you want to start with Councilor?
Sure.
Okay. So I sent out to councilors this letter on the 23rd, and Councilor Healy got back and asked some questions for us. And I just, you don't mind, I'll just go right through them.
Jump right into it.
Okay. He asked that in response to John Lunt's email dated 5/24/24, he mentioned the Bernardston Road to Barton Road expansion is just waiting on one pole to have power transferred from. Has the utility indicated when this might happen? No, we call them on a regular basis. It's very hard to get any kind of an answer that isn't just, we're all working and we'll get to it. So I don't think I can think of any time where they've given us a firm date will it be done. If I'm understanding the communication attachments process correctly, this is when the communications utilities, i.e. Comcast, Verizon, can begin work on the poles. The electrical utility is made safe. Yes, after all the power transfer work is done, then work moves down to the communication space. I believe it is Verizon that does the scheduling. Comcast, they usually work from, I don't know if they work from top to bottom, or they schedule one. When that person is completed, they schedule the other, which in this case might be themselves.
So it's not like multiple companies working on one.
No.
One goes, they're done.
Right.
They were done, then Verizon come in, do their work.
Right.
They're done. Then...
Exactly. Massachusetts doesn't have one touch make ready. So only the owners of the actual, it's either fiber or cable or whatever it is, up on the poles are allowed to touch their own. I met with Natalie Blay on this and a lot of stuff, and it's for them, it's a union issue, and they just go one after the other. And there's a common ticketing system that is sort of kept up to date. And once that's done, once both of them are done, we will get the green to go.
I literally just got an email at 4:38 where Eversource said that they have their crews slated to work the last week of June based on Verizon's current work status on the 3 applications.
Okay. Okay, that's
So,
great.
That's the latest.
Sorry, which one was that?
That's the 3 applications for the North Build.
Right, the one on.
So all 3 of those.
It's on,
are
oh, all
what-
3 of them
Mhm.
then. Oh.
Right, but
But this is
Correct me if-
Eversource.
correct me if I'm wrong. I thought you were asking about the one in Bernardston Road where there's only one left.
Specifically,
Right.
there's only one left.
Right, exactly.
We're almost there, right?
Right.
So let's finish that.
Yeah.
And then we can
Yeah.
actually, let's not start
Right.
in the meadows and do 4 over there when we have one left on Bernardston Road, right?
Yeah, Fern is the one who contacts them regularly, and we do our best to steer them in the direction we want them to go.
They definitely know Bernardston is the first one.
May I ask a question based
Sure.
on what you just said?
Yeah.
Because I also have a couple of questions. When you say Massachusetts does not have a one-touch make ready law, my question is, do other states have it?
Yeah,
So-
not all other states. Touch Make Ready says that when it's time to work in the communication space, one company can move everybody's. It's a lot faster because you don't have to juggle people's schedules. But Massachusetts, it came up for a vote in Massachusetts and it got voted down like not too long ago. I can't
At
remember.
the State
exactly.
House, they voted this
They
down.
voted it down because what I was told was that it was a union issue and they felt they would be voting against the interest of the union shops for Verizon and Comcast, and they didn't want to do that.
Keeping in mind one of our state representatives.
One of our state reps was
Our state senator.
Right.
senator.
Do you want to, yeah, I've got more questions for him.
Oh, no, go ahead. I didn't want to lose that thought. Go ahead.
Once the utilities have completed their work in the communications attachment process, GCET gets the green light to add infrastructure. Yes. Does GCET plan on working with procurement to get subcontractors to install the GCET infrastructure? Will the 3 RFPs be released for the 3 zones in the north end? Yes, we plan actually to do a lot of the work ourselves because it will save about $250,000. But we follow 30B. So anything we do set out to contractors will keep following 30B.
Yeah,
So it's 30B.
30B is the procurement laws for the state of Massachusetts that dictates how you have to put RFPs out, and the idea is to make sure that the process is fair and transparent. Occasionally in the field like tech, there's something that's so specialized, like only one person does it. So you can do a single source exemption, which we've done once or twice, but not generally speaking, no. And it depends on how much you're spending. Below a certain level, you don't really have to do much. Above that, you have to get 3 written quotes, and above a certain level, which you would know better than me, you have to go through the entire RFP process. So, how important is ARPA funding promised by the previous administration to meeting GCET's goals to completing the North End build out? It's essential. If we can't access the money, we can't complete it. So, the estimated households covered in the memo John Lund sent was 960 in the North End. Are those only homes that have pre-registered with GCET? Oh, I wish. Or the total number of potential customers. What is the expected cost of the build out of the North End? So to date, engineering materials, these are rounded up. Materials and make ready are about $520,000. We'll need about another roughly $100,000 to finish. Out of that, 170 to that 200 would be make ready. Oh, I've already said this. We're doing a lot of the work ourselves because when we did put it out to bid for just to subcontract the whole thing out, the labor was an extra $250,000, and we just didn't think that was. We didn't want to spend that.
Yeah, just to follow up on that. So the extra $250,000, you also have to look at timing. So we've got very limited staff here at GCET. The concern is the longer this drags out, the less you don't start making money as quickly, right?
Sure.
So the quicker you get it done, the quicker you start making money. Right?
That's
So,
true.
So you have to look at
and we do have certain areas that we will subcontract out that. I mean, the one we usually say is if there are poles that are not where you can get to them with a bucket truck, there are people who are pole climbers.
Yeah.
And so there's certain things that we can't do. And we're pretty good about, what we can do and do efficiently and what we can't. So we'll try to do a lot of it ourselves, but there's stuff that we will job out because we will look at it and go, yeah, we can't do that.
I'm just thinking optimistically, let's just say Burniston Road starts going, you have your crews on Burniston Road working, and then, another section opens up, right?
Yeah.
And now you have
Yeah.
concurrent areas where you could be working, but you don't have the manpower to do it. At that point, does it make sense to maybe release an RFP for that section just to work on it concurrently so things are getting done quicker?
So it really, for us, it's a balance of how much money do we have to spend, because we know there's more make ready coming in the future. And we have to sort of, I would love to think we would get 960 homes in the first year, but we don't. And if I can just, I think I'll answer your question, or at least partially. You said if 960 homes sign up for GCET and the average monthly subscription plan is $62 a month, that would create around $718,000 in revenue in the new per year. How many years to recapture the cost of the expansion? Our projected ROI is 4 to 5 years. Our actual average revenue per user is higher than that. It's $79.59. But we don't, our historical uptake rates, which are a good rule of thumb, every area is a little different. In the first year, we get about 19-20%. In the second year, that grows to the sort of the low to mid 30s. In the third year, you get to 40%. And then it just, I mean, we have areas where we have 80% coverage now, but it just takes time. There are people who don't want to switch, who like Comcast because we're not water or sewer. There are other people who serve them as well. And people who just find the whole thing super intimidating. We've spent a lot of time helping people switch and helping them understand what they need to do. And we actually go into people's houses and set their TVs up for them and do all that work. Just because we have a lot of people who are just not comfortable with a lot of technical stuff. And one of the things that we really try to do is be really, really good with customer service. Like to think we certainly heard that back a lot. So that helps us, but there's no way to get, it would be awesome. I mean, and the other thing that you have to remember is since it's a subscription and you get it monthly, it's pretty even throughout the year. You wouldn't get even 20% on the first month of the year. So if it's pretty even through the year, you can't take that number and multiply it by 12. When you work the average out, you have to multiply it by 6 because you get about half of them after and half of them before. Yeah. So just to be conservative, we generally take 19-20% of that is, I think it's like 173, 174 houses. I forgot to check, but I think that's pretty close. And if you multiply that out and then multiply it by 6, you get to a number that is more realistic. And then the next year, you get all 12 months of that and 6 months of the next group. So it does build pretty quickly, but it isn't something that you know, as much as I would love that math to work, it doesn't.
It's just like a co-op.
Yeah, right. So if people are paying, they're paying $79.59 a month. So we don't get, it's rounded up to 80. We don't get $960 in July for the year. We get $80 a month throughout the course of the year. And if they sign up on the last month of the year, all we get from our customers is $80. So that was sort of generally how it works. And so when we think about revenue and balancing out against spending money that we had set aside for Make Ready on something else, sorry, I'm just going to see if this is David. Okay, sorry, it's Matt with a technical tip for me, which I need. I think we should be really conservative, and we can't be in a position where we can't meet Make Ready required payments. So probably, I mean, we will look at it, and it may be that we'll have a terrific take rate up there. I actually think it's likely that we might do a little better than normal, and because we track all the demographics, we track everything. And we think that group of people up there would probably have a slightly higher overall average revenue, mostly because we think people up there would probably take a little more TV because it's an older group and older people watch more TV. So, but until we get into it, and no, I just am not comfortable saying we're just going to risk and hope we get enough revenue to cover.
So does that mean once GCET is Make Ready in the North End, they'll have internet and TV services, or just internet?
Internet, TV services, phone services. Right. Once we light it up, then we have 3 basic products for residents. We say there are some businesses up there, but it's overwhelmingly residential. Yeah. And people, we have about 300 and something phone customers. That's not really a huge part of our revenue. We have almost 2,200 customers in total, and just over 600 of them take TV. TV is $95, 126 or 147.50 a month, which is actually where you save the most money over what people are currently doing. We have people that save $1,500 a year by using our internet and TV services. But not everybody wants it, and not everybody will take it. So, so we'll have to see each area. My guess is we'll have a higher percentage, and I think it'll be maybe 20% higher than it is in the overall, but until we We don't know.
That was very helpful. Thank you.
Sure. That, I think, marries up with the city council communication. If you had any other questions, or if anybody else has any other questions about it, I'm happy to answer.
I have what might be controversial questions.
Sure.
What's the actual cost of a pole license?
It's hard to say that. It's somewhere between $2,000 and $5,000. It depends. I guess you could say 3 to 4, but it depends on how hard it is to get it out and to put a new one in. If it's something that is off.
When you say get it out and a new one in.
So poles get replaced, right? The big expense for poles is they go out and they say there's not enough room on this pole, or this pole is so old that we can't attach anything else to it.
Okay.
Part of the issue we have is they're very inclined to say, oh, there's no room. You can't go on here. And that's not always true. So it takes time to get back to them and work that out back and forth.
Can I, since we're on the license,
Yeah.
who
Okay.
are you getting the license for?
Can I finish?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
And if it's if a specific pole is co-owned by both Eversource and Verizon,
And almost all of them.
okay, is a fee paid to both entities?
Yep.
And once a pole is licensed, is there a monthly or annual fee to keep GCET's equipment on said pole?
Yes, it's biannual.
Okay, then what's that cost?
Well, there's two. The actual, first of all, there's a fee just for the general use of the pole, and the combined one is $9.50. So you pay $4.75 to one and $4.75 to the other. But we also have to pay an attachment fee for the radios we have up. That's $15 a month per cluster, which is why in our budget, electricity is very high.
Okay, so the reason I asked this is because, for example, up in the Lunch Drive area of the Meadows, there's several poles with GCET equipment on them, but there is no service yet. And the equipment's been on these poles for years.
Yeah.
Wouldn't we all be best served if this equipment is removed? Until in fact it's, because you're paying for that to be on those poles.
You don't pay until it's lit.
Okay,
And we actually have taken a lot of them down. If there's some up there, then we probably have missed them or.
I don't think there's actual access points there. What you're seeing is a switch. So,
Okay.
so those switches we will be taking down because we've changed the way that we deliver the service. However, we have no place to put those switches currently.
by storage being.
Yeah,
Right.
we're maxed out. at
Yeah.
the Riddell's
So,
buildings.
yeah. So when we build the north, we will have space, and then we will take those out and go through procurement to get rid of them.
But we don't pay the attachment fee until they're lit up. And then we obviously pay more power on top of it.
All right, the previous management was putting equipment on poles without being licensed. The current management, you guys, know that, yet you continue to follow suit. So my question is, are penalties being imposed, and how much money is being spent paying fines as opposed to actual buildup?
Because we stopped back in 2021. When we first started, it's hard to remember now, but 5 and 6 years ago, the municipal space argument was not settled in favor of the pole owners at all. In fact, in 2019, the Connecticut won the right to put stuff up without having to pay anything at all. So in the beginning, it was mostly a verbal agreement with Eversource to pay for power. But there were lawsuits all over the place between states and utilities and municipalities about whether or not you could use the municipal space, because the municipal space is the common space. It's the same thing. And in the beginning, when there was a question, yeah, we kept building. We stopped building in, I think, March of 2021. We haven't built anything for a little over 3 years because it actually looked pretty good, but we just didn't believe it. We figured that eventually appeals would come, and they did, and that the utilities would win, and they did. So what happened was, even in places like Connecticut, where it's supposedly free for municipalities to attach to the pole and use it for whatever they want, they said, yep, that's true, but you still have to sign a contract with the pole owners, and the pole owners just put all the same restrictions in the contract that you're by law forced to sign. So we have assigned contracts. We've had them since 21. We haven't paid any penalties. We're like, we have for everywhere we are, we have licenses in. We've had them in for about 2.5 to 3 years, and we're working just fine with them. It's frustrating because it's really slow. I will say the people we're working with at the companies are fine.
What you said you got licenses in.
License applications,
Okay.
and sorry, I wasn't
So
specific.
that was my next question.
Yeah. We do.
Because they go, you guys have been doing this since 2017, and from what I understand, there are only 9 poles that are licensed.
Mhm.
Okay.
So here's how that works.
So how do you
Sure.
get, so how, I mean, doesn't a pole have to be licensed for you guys to actually use it? I mean,
So we went to Eversource and Verizon in 2019 and 2020 and said, you know that there's stuff up on the poles. And they knew. So we said, all we want to do is be a good regular customer. So we want to start this process. You must have a pole agreement signed before you can put any license applications in. They are big companies. It takes time for that negotiation to happen. But we worked our way through it. We are licensed. We have pole, excuse me, that's incorrect. I didn't say that right. We have pole agreement contracts with both Eversource and Verizon. We have an absolute right to be up. They have said, as long as you're working your way through the license process and you don't do any more until you got a certain area license. Like, for example, we don't have to wait for every single license to be done to work up north, because we have very little ability to say, hey, let's do this one next. But she's pretty good at cajoling people. And we did put new stuff first because we thought they would probably just work from top to bottom, which is mostly true. So when we stopped in 2021, I think the last thing was Deerfield Street. At that point, we had thought, okay, we'll put these license applications in, and we've heard from people. Our attorney also represents Shutesbury. We spoke to people in Leverett and Westfield Gas and Electric and a bunch of other. I've spoken to MLPs in Concord and a bunch out in the eastern part of the state, and they all say it's a pain, but you can work through it. But it takes a long time, and it took almost 2 years, because the first thing they do is they say, okay, we have to go out and survey everything. We said to Eversource, here you go. Here's all the GPS. Here's the photogrammetry. We tell you everything. And their answer is no, we have to do it. And again, I think it's a union issue. So they go out, they usually subcontract. And they have people go take pictures of the poles. They measure how high different attachments are, because the National Electric Safety Code says you have to be this far away from secondary power, and each of the communications has to be this far away from each other, and it all has to be this high up off the ground. The problem is almost no poles are right. The secondary power is way lower than it should be, or other things are much higher than they should be. So when that happens, it isn't like, here you go, okay, great, everything's fine, thanks, let's go. There's problems everywhere. So we have to go back and go, they thought that we were somebody else. We have licenses in where they said, well, you have to go above, and we're like, no, that's us. So, and their answer is, well, we have to go back to the entire start of the survey process. So it's a messy thing to work through because it's really the last monopoly left in tech. The utility pole owners know exactly what they've got, and they know exactly how to use it. There's widespread reporting about how delays come up. You have to remember, even though they've been good to work with, Verizon is a direct competitor of ours. Right. So they don't really want us on the poles, and we do what we can to move things along as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
When we started working with Verizon, we have, you have to correct me if I'm wrong, surety insurance, surety bonds, and we had to up it because they knew that the amount of poles that we were on was greater than was licensed and applied for. So yeah.
So ever since I've been here, they've known. And we said so. We went to them. We went to the first meeting. The first meeting was with Eversource, where we said, we all know what happened. These are all up. We all know about municipal gain, but this was after we had started to think, I don't think municipal gain is going to win. So we went down and said, okay, so you say that you want us to go through your licensing process. Okay. Because we're not just offering municipal. If all we did was connect up the fire station and the library, then you don't have to pay anything. You don't have to go through this process. You can't make any money.
You have to pay the pole survey. Make sure
Yes,
the pole is safe
you're right.
to do it,
No, that's true.
but they work it much faster.
But as soon as you're a commercial competitor, it's an entirely different process.
I got one more question, and it's probably completely innocent, but it just looks a little funny. I have a Verizon account, my cell phone. I'm sure they have different accounts receivable departments, different kind of accounts, this being one that goes to different places. Sure. So my question is, why you guys have or are making payments to Verizon to a private residence in Weymouth, a guy by the name of Matthew Gagan,
because he works out of his home. Lots of people work out of their home in the tech industry. Well, one of the things we're putting together for the mayor, she asked us to put together all the things we've spent so far. We just talked about this afternoon. We're asking to get a screenshot from within their system. These all, because it seemed that the mayor had real concerns about that as well too. So we asked during our meeting, do you not think these are real? And she just said she had concerns, which is fine. So they are real. They were all made to Verizon. Right. And they're all cached, and we can and are looking to the packet we're putting together, which
I'm not suggesting anything.
No, I understand.
It just kind of looks,
Yeah, that I mean, it's partly a COVID thing, but a lot of with the guy we work with.
I mean,
Rich
people pay GCET, and it doesn't go to,
Right, but a lot of stuff goes to PO boxes, right. And you don't know what those are. Too. So
I will say, when I worked from home during COVID, I had things delivered to me for GCET and brought them to the office, right? So I think it is. I think you started to say this. It is a holdover probably from COVID, and Verizon. He lives right outside of Boston, and my assumption is they closed whatever office he was in Boston before. I mean, I'm happy to ask him why does it go?
Like I said,
but regardless, it's easy to show that it's cash.
Right,
Verizon. So we'll show you.
And the application is moving forward, right? So that's the most important thing for us.
I read this.
Right.
I read the same thing I read about the fraud in Orange too, so I can see why people would think we should know. But we do spend a lot of time on it, and we are as careful as we can be about where money goes, because literally we have a statutory responsibility to do that. So It does go to a guy named Matt Gagan in Weymouth, but it is a check to Verizon,
Right.
and they are cashed by Verizon, and in the packet we send in the mail, we'll put a little screenshot in that shows that.
What, like, okay, just following up on that, what is
Sure.
that for?
It's for Make Ready, because the way Make Ready works is they give you an estimate of how much they think it's gonna cost, and then they demand you pay that before they do the work. And there is no choice of what to do, because the way it's been set up and the way they've worked, frankly, with the State House in Boston, that we have no power in that at all. Eversource did actually change some language for us. After a year, Verizon refused to change anything in their contract. And basically they said, sign or get off the list. And we said, okay, and we signed. Because once you sign that contract, you have a right to be there. It's not, it's.
So you're paying for a contract.
The Make Ready is your.
What is the service? Like when?
Right,
Yeah.
It's, you pay separately. Remember, we talked about the survey, right, where they go out and look and measure
Yeah.
everything, you pay separately for that. Make Ready is you're paying for if you have to replace a pole, but also everything has, in most poles, they want you to move 2 inches up or 2 inches down to accommodate new. They want to move the secondary power back up out of the way. We have to pay for that. So, because that's the agreement the FCC made, and the FCC preempts a ton of localities, all local municipalities. The state of Massachusetts says that they direct their own, but if you go to the state, it's word for word what the FCC says. So we pay them, we're essentially paying their crews to go out and do all the power rearranging. It's all because we pay both Eversource and Verizon. And Verizon handles the comm space, so we assume that some of those payments go through to Comcast. Doubt it, but that's the way it works. And once that's done, and only when that's done, are we allowed to put our stuff up on our fiber, an attachment up on the poles. Then they go out and look at it again and look and see if they can charge us any more money. And then they will give us a license. The only license we've gotten for the 10 poles, the only reason we got that is that's only for municipal licenses. So that one we got right away.
That's also my other question. Who is giving out the license? Who is getting the money for the license? Does this work like a liquor license or a tobacco license?
No.
Okay, so
It's
who is
different.
getting it?
So
The pole
the
owner?
contract between GCET and the pole owners is GCET contracting with private parties, right? So it's not a government thing. It is the government sets the rate, kind of like power, where the FCC says this is the reasonable rate you can charge people to attach to your poles. The telecom law of 1996 says you have to let them attach to your poles unless it's unsafe. If you say it's unsafe, then you have to let them pay to make it safe so they can attach to your poles. Because in the beginning, when they bought all the poles, they just said, nope, nobody can attach. And so the rates are set by the government, but we have a contract with a private owner of infrastructure property. That's what I say when I say it's the last monopoly there is. They own them jointly. So we get a license from Verizon and from Eversource, and we have to pay separately for each one. So
Okay,
they
when
get
you're
the money.
applying for a license, you are applying from what would be your competitors, right?
Applying to them. Yeah, we're applying to Verizon to let us up on the pole to be their competitors.
So they have an added incentive to not give you that license.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they only have DSL too, which is like slower than mud, so,
Right.
right? I mean,
So if they absolutely refuse, we go to court. So what they do is they make it take a long, long time. It's gotten much more expensive. The only area where they're allowed to not have things be set by the FCC is pole replacement. Surprise, surprise, pole replacement is 3 times what it was 10 years ago. So it's a difficult process. And like I said, I'm a little split in how I feel about them because they have worked with us. We went to them and said, look, this is what happened. And it's not in anybody's interest. We'll be paying customers. They have worked with us. The people we work with, and honestly, everybody we work with is pretty far down the totem pole. But overall, corporately, they don't like it. They're trying to sell Verizon internet to the same people that and you can hardly blame them. They own the poles. They're theirs. So.
And what we also run into is that GCET, Verizon, Eversource, there was no playbook. You know, when GCET was first brought forward to the city council, there was no playbook to say, hey, how'd they do it over here? So that's why some of these nuances that were before the commission and before the current management team took place, you know, it's easy for us to say they shouldn't have done that. But in their minds, this is how it was done. And this was okay. And I can remember speaking to 2 mayors ago and hearing, that's municipal space, we can do it. That was just the mindset. And it wasn't said, you couldn't really say, well, how'd they do it over there? Let's look at how they did it, because people weren't doing it. So that's why we're moving through this uncharted, community-owned internet and TV provider. Because we're not a TV network. We provide a streaming service like Netflix.
The other thing I would say is that we deal with MBI, the Mass Broadband Institute. They call us a unicorn because the truth is most people just job load it. Mm-hmm. And they have a company come in, and we, in the long run, believe that the way we do it saves citizens more money. We think that people can save about 20% of their entire tax bill by getting GCET if they take the TV as well. So we do it this way. I came in after the first group, and it was the way we did it, and there was no way we were going to change it at that point. But the fact that we roll our own trucks and fix our own everything is pretty unique in the way that people do
Yeah, I got a question. So 600,000 that you've spent so far on the ARPA money?
500. There's 100 to finish up.
Okay, so would you say that's mostly spent on fees and licensing?
No, it's spent on, we had to do our own engineering, and we're literally, for the mayor, we're breaking down, and we'll be able to be specific when we get all those. Every invoice we have is in accounting, all of it are, but to put them all together and sort of make sure that they're understandable is a different thing. So we're happy to do that. It takes a long time.
No,
I'm sorry, just to finish. A lot of it's equipment. We had to buy miles and miles of fiber optic cable. We had to buy radios. We had to buy lots of stuff. We had to pay for our own engineering. In the end, we think about $170,000 to $200,000 out of the 600-ish is going to be fees, and that's almost all make-ready related. Not penalties or
the rest of this is just being stored? Was that for the north build out?
Well, no, if you drive up north on 7th Street, you'll see that we have a building up there. It's called a local convergence point. That's right next to the old water. It's sort of
park.
Is that?
It was a Boy Scout park or something.
It's the civil air control.
Oh.
If you live here all your life.
Right, yeah. So
it's where kids hang out.
Right, so you're correct. A lot of it is just waiting, and that's why really at this point to not finish with just tragic because we sunk so much money into it. And a lot of it is
finishable? Is it finishable?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And getting crossing 90, does any of this have to cross 91?
It's still under 91 on Severance, and we own a conduit.
So, which was a godsend, because trying to work with the Department of Transportation is very, very difficult. The mayor had her hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
So, one thing that would help me to understand this better is every time there's a bill that comes to us for make ready,
Mhm.
like make ready, that's $20,000.
Mhm.
And it will say something like say Eversource Verizon. And none of it says where it's being done,
Mhm.
no location on any of bills. Are you, if it's 20,000, and you told us that you had no, you, Eversource and Verizon work at their own, when they want to, not at like our, the way we would like
Yeah.
to. So are any of those bills, like for 20,000, are they going, looking at doing aerial surveys and looking at poles that are not in the north end of town? Many of them, because I have no idea of the location.
Right,
None
and
of
we,
them
and
say
we,
anything.
and we heard you, so in the pack we're putting together, we're taking those invoices and tying them in for you to exactly where that is. What we paid for make ready, not for survey, so there has been survey done on areas outside the North Build, because there has to be, that's the way they work through them. So make ready, the bigger bills, the big bills.
20,000,
Yeah, or
18,000.
some 19, some of them are even bigger than that.
22.
Right,
7.
those we can do that for you, and from now on, if that's what you want, that's what we'll do.
Are you saying that every one of those bills was for areas in the north end of town?
No,
I don't know that
I can
that's true.
answer that.
Okay,
So I will say on those bills, you will see somewhere in very small writing, the application number.
I know.
Okay,
I know.
right, so, there have been the 3 for the North Field, actually, yeah, 3 for the North Field and then Deerfield Street. Which we have paid all of that for Deerfield Street, and they are reviewing that because they recognize that we are on that pole, those poles. And so it is possible that we'll end up doing a true up and maybe we will receive funds back, maybe they, so that's my dream. A true up happens and we would get some more, but so those are the 4 that we've paid make ready for, plus the fire station.
So what are the 4? Can you say that again? What are the 4?
Sure, so it's Berniston Road with Severance, and then a handful of different areas. There's a Leiden Road, Nash Mill, and there is the Meadows area.
Right.
We're still waiting on the Adams Road.
And follow up, are you planning on going on the poles or on the lights? On Berniston?
So we do the fiber on the poles, but then use lights.
right, so the way it works is, like you said, there's radios out there that aren't connected to anything. We agree, we thought that was ridiculous. So we did take most of them down, and what you see is a switch. I've said, I don't know if anybody else agrees, I really believe that the original mayor thought you just put the radios up and they somehow connected to each other and made internet, but that's not how it works. You have to pay, so what attaches to the poles, and this is just because of their jargon, Mayor. The fiber attaches to the poles. The radios attach to the street lights, and so you attach at each space where there's a radio, the fiber goes up and attaches to the street light. We put them on the street light because it's so easy, since the city owns the street lights. So we apply for new street lights, and we will be applying. You saw the longer list of things we haven't done, but that we want to apply for the North Build.
I got a question about.
Sure. So, but the reason we do that is the easiest part of the whole thing is every street like Greenfield literally has a plug on top, and we can take the radios, plug them into the top. We don't have to get Eversource to come out to break power to attach us to power, which would take forever and be really expensive. The first mayor gets credit for that. That was really a smart idea. So the answer is we do both, right? So we attach fiber to the poles because we have to get from one radio to the next. And we have over 100 miles worth of fiber. And when we finish up there, I'm sorry, I can't remember how many miles of fiber the 3 areas of the North are. I can't. So we do both.
So you actually, I'm sorry, Mayor, did you have?
No, go ahead.
Do you actually have to have a street light to make this work?
Yes, because that's how we power the radios. And the alternative to put like a transformer up on the pole.
Oh, because I know that. Something that mentioned to me that you're asking for more poles or more lights, right?
Which will be paid for out of our.
Because the distance between them.
Yeah,
Is not.
so we say to make sure that people get the speeds they need, the bubble around each radio is about 500 feet. Okay, occasionally we'll sneak one a little farther if it's really line of sight and we can measure and it'll work, but they have to be about 500 feet.
All right, so whether there's a lamp on the pole or not, I mean, even if there's a lamp on a pole, a street lamp, it's gotta be powered,
Yes,
okay? So you could have a pole without a lamp because the power's gotta go there anyway, right? And, but here, my point is the lamps cost money and then the lamps come on and off. And the electricians, I might be way off here, so
you're good, you're good.
you'll correct me, but I'm wrong, right? So lights come on at night. The city pays those electric bills. So if you have a pole that doesn't need a light,
Right.
we're ahead of the game.
So my answer to you is all the power we pay for, and we spoke with Carol before she left, the city pays for streetlights that are lit according to an algorithm that Greenfield Light and, I'm sorry, I can't remember Carol's department has worked out with Eversource. We pay for the power we use separately. So we're billed separately. So the city doesn't pay for our streetlight power usage. And it's literally so much easier and less expensive to plug into a streetlight. There doesn't have to be a light in it at all. So, but the fixture needs to be there
So
because we own the fixture. So we would buy the fixture,
you being
GCET, put it up, and then it's up to the city to decide if they want to put a light in there or not. If they don't, then the city pays nothing. If they do, then yes, the city would pay that they decided. Although for the amount we're doing, it wouldn't bother me if we paid that either. It's very little money, but maybe that's precedent. I shouldn't be setting without talking.
I'm gonna try to, just
Right.
work it off,
So
Is it legally possible to have your stuff on without a street light? Like, what's the importance of the street?
it's way less expensive
Okay.
and it's way more bureaucratically efficient. Because if we put up, you can buy it's a little transformer, because of course the power for the streetlight is different than the power that generally runs. But to do that, you've got to fit it in to your communication space, and you have to do what they call breaking power, which means you have to tap into the secondary, or even, I think it's not the primary, it's the secondary. And only Eversource can tap into the secondary. So it's another thing where you're back on their schedule. You get charged a lot for them to do that because they don't want to do that, and I don't blame them.
How much is a street light like that?
Oh, $300?
I don't know.
I don't remember. But we did go through this whole process.
It's not that much. The code, because the code had
No,
its process is that much. Right.
I think
And-
the whole thing is like,
Right.
with the arm too, I think it's like,
Right.
I could be wrong. Mayor, I could be wrong.
Does GCET put that up?
Yeah.
No, well, no, we would pay,
Oh, I thought you meant put up.
right, sorry, no, we would pay a third party to put those up in the space, because at that point, you are in the electrical space and our trucks are not insulated and our techs should not be in that
Yeah,
space.
we're not rated.
Right, so we would pay a third party, we would go out to bid depending upon how much it would be, or probably do an IFB, which is getting 3 quotes from people, but, yeah, we wouldn't do that work ourselves, so that would be funded by our.
We haven't done anything.
We haven't done any of that at all, because there was no point of spending that money until we had the licenses and built the fiber up there.
You guys, GCET is in the black,
We have been for the last 2 years.
okay?
We will need to be able to do, when we made the budget back in January of 23, this year, we have two really big one-time expenses. One's 90 grand to pay off the last of the retirement, because the first thing that I did when I came here was I fired half the people here. Actually, I did that with the mayor before I got here. But they work part of the year, so I walked in the first week, got a bill for like $260,000 for retirement. At the time, monthly revenues for GCET were like $2,200. So we worked with the retirement committee, who were great. We would not be here without them. And they let us spin it out over a certain number of years, mostly because I went to them and said, look, fiscal year, you pay on the calendar year, can we pay part in this? And it just worked. So this year we have to pay the last 90,000. I think it's actually 89 and change. And then we have to pay $135,000 of CDBG that we originally took out to try to get in to Leiden Woods. And Leiden Woods is essentially built on a giant rock. And we just failed. We could not figure out a way to get there that wouldn't cost 5 times what the grant money was. And we looked for years and we finally said, look, we can't, it's better for us to give you this money back because it's so difficult to get there.
So Leiden's not gonna have, Leidenwood is not gonna.
It will, because when it was first built,
So everything's underground up there? Or?
that's the point. Most of the underground places in the city, I think it's also Mayor, I think Silvercrest is the same. What happens is it's cheaper for the developers to have Comcast and Verizon come in and put in conduit when everything is all opened up. Problem is, once it's closed up, Eversource, Comcast and Verizon won't let anybody else in. Now, lately, within the last 6 years, the same rules that apply to utility poles apply to conduit. We went to Verizon and said, we'd like to do this. And they said, we want you to finish all the licensing for on the poles first, which is not unfair for them to say. So once that's done, we can apply to go through Verizon's conduit into Leiden Woods. And really, unless we can get a monster grant, you know, we're up in Oak Ports. We probably could, with a bunch of retained earnings and probably a grant too, or bond, get into Greenfield Gardens. Underground is very hard for us. Underground is 20 to 30 times. Leiden Woods is even more than that. So one of the things we're doing is we've got a grant that we're feeling very good about, and included in that grant is ground penetrating radar and something called a vibratory plow, which lets us lay our own small conduit. And then we can get to Fargo, we can get to Briar Knoll, we can get to Silvercrest, because we know there are certain places we have to get to. If we can do that and trench in dirt, we can do it. But rock is really hard for everybody. That's why for Wilson's, we have been part of the development for it, because it's really important for us to have the developers know where we need to have conduit that we will pay for to go into Wilson's, and then from Wilson's into the other building they're building. Because if we missed that, we'd never hit.
So what you're saying is, you guys are in the black, you're making money, you can reinvest in yourselves, right? I mean,
We have made money the last 2 years. We'll be right around, if we can do all the transfers before the end of the year, we should be right around break even. We haven't made a lot of money.
right,
We
okay,
just barely made enough to be in the black because we've been so busy paying off old debt. Next year's the first year that operationally we won't have $90,000 or $100,000 or more that we have to pay off to an old debt. And next year
let me ask you,
we'll
if
make
there was
good
no
money.
pandemic, and there was no aqua, where would you be?
You go into the council saying we need a big bond if we're going to pay all of this make ready. That's where we'd be, because we took over and they said, well, it's down to zero. That's not true. There were hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of liability that didn't get explained to people that we had to assume when we took over. We've negotiated a lot of it away. We've negotiated penalties away. We have spun out over time other debts. We've worked with Eversource and Verizon to make sure the pace of Make Ready fits the pace of the money we have. ARPA was really important for us to go, and we have to have it. And I can still see, we might even come for a smaller bond just to make sure we have enough. We have, like I said, some grants that we feel very positive about that will allow us to pay some Make Ready out of that. But Make Ready is a huge amount of money. And I'll be honest, if I had known, I would never have taken this job. Because the former mayor was not, we sat in this room and had a real dust up about it because it wasn't honest. There was a lot of liabilities.
Former.
I'm talking Mayor Martin slamming this and yelling at each other because it really was a difficult situation. We've managed to, with ARPA, we will cover a lot of it. With other grants, we will cover more. We didn't ask for a bond last year because the previous administration said we're so close to the borrowing limit. We want you to pay for some capitalized things like long-term Juniper contracts out of the grant. And we said, okay, because they asked us if we would do that. So we try to work with the city where we can. But ARPA is really important. Other grants are important. We have next year is the last year we have elevated bond payments. There was a snafu with the bonding group that where we would never have done it. But after that, then it's $517,500 next year. The year after that, it drops to about $380. The year after that, it drops to about $320. This is nothing about city borrowing availability, but it certainly says that we would easily be able to handle a bond to cover any, in terms of could GCET generate the income to pay for it.
And that's an important point, is the bonds that GCET has and now, bonds that if we have in the future paid for by the people who have GCET, means that they're paying. It's not paid by property taxes.
The first several years, that wasn't true. The first several years, we
Right.
did not have enough customers.
Yeah.
So we would pay the bond, but the city sort of forgave a lot.
Well, and that was the understanding,
It
you know,
was.
when GCET
It
was
was.
first established, was it was gonna take 5 years to get into the black. There was no way to not do it that way.
Right.
You didn't have any customers, you had to pay upfront, pay with property taxes.
Yep.
And then what the hope is in the future as GCET expands and GCET becomes even more fiscally positive than it is now, is that there hopefully will be a time that GCET can say, hey, with retained earnings, we can give back to the city. But that will take some time.
The entire first 5 years of our existence was getting enough customers to generate enough revenue to get into the black. We did that 2 fiscal years ago, last fiscal year. This year, we're gonna have anywhere from a little small profit to taking some money out of retained earnings because of those one times. Next year, we're slated to make 6 figures amount of money. We need to put some of that into retained earnings, but we're likely gonna spend some of that on Make Ready too. The year after that, every year, the dynamic gets better. And I really hope we do get up north, because you are right, the more customers we have, the more revenue we get.
And it's just like starting an internet company that nobody had ever done before. We're the only city department that is operates like a business. It's looked at, how are you gonna make money?
Right.
Well, right now, we're making money and at the same time saving the users, unfortunately, you, me.
Yeah.
I'm not a user.
Trying.
You know, we still have to pay Comcast. But saving millions of dollars over the history of GCET for those who, of the 86% or whatever it is now, who are able to
We
access.
think we saved, comparing prices, we think we saved Greenfielders about $2 million.
Is that,
Available, people, 86% of the citizens can get it.
Can get it.
This
Yeah.
may be really interesting. Why isn't it GCET just to see this weird power
Oh,
electric private.
I can answer that.
Because that's really.
Because it was specifically set up that way by Massachusetts government. That's what all of Mass General Law, Chapter 164 is specifically set up. It was originally set up over 100 years ago because back then every town had their own electric plant. And after like close to a century of frankly just horrible corruption, the state said, nope, the way cities run are great for a lot of what cities do, but the speed with which a business has to run, the ability, quite frankly, to remove the decision-making from local politics, which is what it says, what all the case, there's 120 years of case law about it, which I know way more about it than I ever wanted to, says that two things. One, the experience was, that's no reflection on anybody here, but in the past, it would get tied up with local politics and bad decisions would be made and municipalities lost huge amounts of money. And the second thing is I can't wait because the general manager has a lot of power under 164. And it's really because, hey, there he is. It's okay. Ah, okay.
No, there wasn't.
So I can't wait for the third Thursday of the month to go to council. And I have to be able to make decisions and enter into contracts with people. And I have to do it at the speed of business and not the speed of government. I have 30 years of private business experience.
You wait for the third Thursday, you're gonna have to go to the following month.
Okay, well. So it was done on purpose.
And it's the same, on the government side, one of the reasons why Greenfield chose to go to a mayor over a city council, over a select board, was because select boards made decisions on the first Tuesday of every month.
Yeah.
And things went slow. And I can remember, talking to the new selectman saying, you can't just show up on the first Tuesday and not do anything for the rest of the month. Yeah. And it was because everything just moved so slow. So that's right. It's the system that was in place when this, long before us and probably will be long after us.
Yeah. It's kind of a Massachusetts thing to decentralize.
Decentralize.
Health doesn't. It's really part of the basic model of Massachusetts. Yes.
I got a kind of basic question.
Sure.
I have another question about something you mentioned a minute ago. We're dealing with these giant corporations kind of have a selling costs as far as these licensing fees, timetables, and this Commonwealth, obviously, in their wisdom, has decided to side with them instead of us. And so we're stuck, right?
Yeah.
Why don't we just build poles? Like, why don't we just jam the pole in the ground?
Because the National Electric Safety Code says you can't just have poles everywhere.
So I got to follow up to that.
Okay.
So I know that Chicopee, for example, is more sending out fiber optic themselves. They've got other towns, Chicopee Electric Light, municipal light plant, just like this is, right?
Mhm.
This is a municipal light plant.
Yeah.
They own their poles.
Right.
And so I'm assuming it's going to be an eminent domain situation if the city decided, could we just, put the legislative switch?
Yeah. No, because the FCC has preempted all municipalities and states and said municipalities may not take back the poles by eminent domain. They may not charge to, we used to be able to charge them for being in our space.
And that was a valid question, probably within the last 10 years.
It was too, but the FCC stepped in and said, nope, the federal government says they can be there. They don't have to pay you. You have to pay them. And in this state, what you said is very true. Last year, there's a company called Hotelco out of Maine, and they provide services to MLPs that job everything out. They sued Eversource and Verizon. They went to mediation with the Department of Telecommunications and Cable, and the Department of Telecommunications and Cable sided 100% with Eversource.
Respect between federal and state camera.
Yes, and I've talked to legislators. There's two. We can't just make a giant thing. One, because it is true that there was a lot of stuff up on the polls, but also They won't do it. I sat with Natalie Blay in this room. She said, I can't do this. I'd be going against unions in Massachusetts. I won't do it.
It's such a crock of crap.
Well, I'm just telling you what she said. I'm 100% on your side, but that's the response I got.
Yeah, I would like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously.
Good luck. But I will ask again, but
Tell her to put it right.
okay. I mean, they helped us with stuff that she sat in this room. She was sitting there, her aide was there, and she said,
And then, but the other side that you kind of jumped, you said it, but you jumped over it, is that unlike communities that are starting out that maybe used their legislators to push to get moving a new project,
right,
we don't have that same ground to stand on because we were the first ones to the party, and
right.
maybe we.
So I do have a follow-up. So you mentioned the little like gopher thing or whatever you call it. I don't remember the name. That's
Wow.
Yeah, the underground
Yeah.
conduit there. Is it true? And so I'm assuming that it would be faster to have, your internet would be potentially faster if you had a direct cable connection, fiber optic cable to your house. So is there any planning or thinking about potentially allowing customers to use it, buy that as a premium service? It sounds like that's a way around these, these cell phones.
Two things.
Yep.
First, it's absolutely faster. We've just finished developing an open source solution that's way less expensive because a connection, fiber to the home connection, is generally over $5,000 per home. We're way below that because we're really lucky and have a very talented technical staff. You have to do that, and you have to get off the poles to make that work. So the long-term vision is to not be on any poles in Greenfield, but there's no way to do that and have the revenue to keep GCET going. It has to be a transition. We do have, we would be looking to buy with ARPA money prototypes of how we would connect directly up to homes, because for example, a place like Lover's Lane, you can't use radios there. So we have it. Once we can buy the prototypes with the ARPA funds, we can test it. It'll work because he's not going to buy it until it works. So, and we can do 2 gigs symmetrically. So, but it is more expensive and it does take time. And the first thing I think we should do is get underground in the areas where it matters most. And that's in neighborhoods, because we own the greenway and we don't have to ask anybody's permission. We have to do other things. We have to make sure we don't hit gas. We can't just wantonly destroy all the work that Greenfield has done over the years. So we have to work with them on how to work through. And there are ways with literally power washers to go through the roots so we don't kill all the trees, which we don't want to do, and then get to everybody's house. It is more expensive and we have to do it gradually so we can afford it, because as much as we'd love to have, pardon me, as much as we'd love to do everything now, we can't afford it. So, yes.
You mentioned one of the big expenses that you still had. I asked about that yesterday, that 135, the CDBG funds that we repaid.
It was repaid back in August of last year. Yep. And the 90,000 has been repaid. That's why we need the ARPA for this year to offset. And it's pretty common to reclass at the end of the year. And it's pretty common to use grants to support, because a lot of these purchases were things that we normally would have come to council for a bond for. But we were trying to honor what the previous administration asked us to do, which is to use ARPA for it instead.
You said the bond you have now, when did you say that's a big deal?
Sorry, I didn't hear exactly what you said.
You were talking earlier about a bond that you have now. When did you say that was gonna be? I thought you said like.
The main bond still has, I believe, 12 or 13 years to run.
Oh. I thought you
But-
had much sooner.
But it isn't level. It steps down every year. It's high now because we have had some other bonds. They were supposed to be amortized over 15 years. And there was a mistake. Lock and Ward made a mistake and amortized them over 3 years instead, which was not helpful at all.
Those are the capital bonds.
The capital bonds, we're actually supposed to sign off on that, but look, nobody did it on purpose. It was a tough thing for us. So I worked with Liz Gilman, and that's why we hadn't for the last couple of years paid for indirects, because we said, you can't hand us this and next year, a year earlier than we were supposed to, we've grown enough that now we are going to pay indirects too in the next year's budget. Because I will say, the city does a lot and we appreciate it. And we're happy to talk to you guys whenever you want. You can ask any question you want. I want to make sure we did not communicate super well in the last couple of weeks, which I think was certainly partly my fault. But what I would ask is, if you have questions, come to someplace like this, write stuff out for me so I know exactly what you want to know. I have been accused of talking a lot. I can talk a lot. It's a very complex subject.
I think the issue is like line items and when building is concerned, it's like,
Sure.
okay, I have to pay them. Somebody gives me a bill to pay.
Right.
I want to see what it is. It's like, okay,
Sure.
you owe me X, Y, and Z. You know, what's the mystery? There's no mysteries.
Yeah. You know what? I think what was probably most my fault in this whole thing is that isn't how the previous mayors had done it. And I just didn't stop and
I'm
think
not a mayor.
maybe
So,
that
I'm
you
not
wanted a
speaking for her.
different level of.
I'm not gonna pay a bill if I don't know.
No, yeah, of course, but I'm just saying, if we will provide whatever information people need. We're a small group. We're gonna ask that we not get flooded all the time with that. But I have no problem telling you guys anything you want to know. The only thing we keep secret, and we'll probably go into a regular meeting and have an executive session, is we have competitors who would very much like to know some of what we're doing. And we just can't allow that because they follow us on Facebook. They watch meetings, they read all of everything in the paper. I know them. We meet with them all the time. We know Eileen Leahy from Comcast very well. And we just have to be really careful. We're small. We don't have hundreds of lawyers. With the first thing that happened when we started with TV is we got a cease and desist from NBC. Totally unrelated to Comcast, of course. But that's the world we live in. Telecom is a tough world. Everything is fought out in the legal and regulatory sphere. So we're just really careful. But to you, that kind of information, sure. If you want that, you can have it.
Another question. And I'm sorry if this is like just very, because I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. Okay, so can we put up equipment on a street light without a license?
We
On the
can
light,
we
not the
can
pole.
put it on the light. We just can't connect it.
Okay, so
Which is what they did
That's
originally.
what they did, and that's what I really believe.
can
they
it be
thought-
in use?
No,
No,
because
then
you
what's
need
the
the
point of putting it
fiber,
up?
right,
Right,
there's no
exactly.
point, they just were
None.
weathering it
None.
for no reason.
That's why we went and took almost all of it down, because it was sitting out in the weather for years with no use. It was like a Potemkin network.
They cause a lot of headaches when someone said, why can't I get it? The radio's right there. Well, there's nothing hooked to it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So yes, we could, but unless the radios could magically connect to each other, which is not a thing that works, and we have to pay because we have to use the poles to get the fiber to connect the radios.
Okay. What is a pool agreement? You mentioned that a few times. What is a pool? Who is the agreement between? What does that look like?
Sure.
financially?
We have a whole agreement with Eversource, and we have a whole agreement with Verizon.
That is in replacement of a license.
No. First, you have to have an agreement that says they agree that you can be on the poles. So they have to agree, but they can put a lot of conditions on it. So we have those agreements, we're legally on the poles. we would be legally on the poles anyway, because the Telecom Act of 1996 said we can be on the poles.
What are they getting?
We pay these licenses. The only good thing about them is once it's done, it's done. You don't ever have to get relicensed. What they get after that is they get a fee every year of $9.40 or $9.50 a pole.
Is that the whole agreement?
No.
What is the?
The pole agreement is the agreement that says this private company agrees that under these conditions, you can be.
Is
on
there
our
a financial
private
aspect to it?
Yes, the fee that we pay every year of $9.50
Oh, okay, yes.
per pole. So they do get money for that. That is not what they do this for. They do this because Make Ready allows them to use public money to replace aging private infrastructure. That's it. The Make Ready is everything. Shutesbury's Make Ready went $1 million over because
We can't demand that they do anything.
no.
Not even a pilot.
No, which is why we want to eventually get off the poles. But you got to get on the poles so you can generate the revenue to eventually get off the poles. Right. The best network we would have, the most secure network, because we also do all public safety too, would be completely underground, completely owned by Greenfield, and it would be the most robust, it would last the longest. It is the end state that is best for Greenfield, but it's going to be years before we get there. Years. And Shrewsbury, Selco is a company where they do own all their own poles. They've had old cable TV and internet for, I think it's about 25 years now. I think it's even more than that, but they're just now, and they make a lot of money every year because they have every customer in town because they do not allow Comcast or Verizon into Shrewsbury.
Oh, so the municipality can do that.
If you wanted to buy all the poles, if you had enough money to buy all the poles back, go right ahead. We'd love it.
Greenfield didn't sell it in the 1800s or the late 1800s. They had their own electricity
Right,
and they sold it.
right. They sold the
So-
poles.
We can blame
So-
them from way back
So-
then.
So-
Yeah, poor fathers really messed that one up for us.
Can I back up for one thing?
Of course.
I just want to be sure I understand. It seems like what my dentist makes me do, pay in advance,
Mhm,
okay?
mhm.
So I think that was one of my questions that I wrote in red. You are, you're paying bills that are estimates, and that like
Yes.
goes back to what Michael was talking, counselor was talking about. It's like, so they're just guessing, and then you must pay then, and then
Right.
are you done? Do you owe more? Is there
They-
a balance, or do they get reimbursed?
You can owe more, generally speaking, unless something goes really wrong. It's not a guess. I mean, they do put work in too, so it's a pretty good estimate. But yeah, please.
So with Eversource, you pay in advance and they don't charge you extra for the surveys. For Verizon, you do a pre-survey payment
Right.
and then they survey and then they come back and bill you for the rest of whatever that actual survey costs because they do contract those out. So those are ones that you've received for the second portion of the survey.
So that very rarely, like, we're gonna give you a bunch.
Not in the survey, no, never in the
Yeah.
survey, no. Yeah. Yes, right, because our,
Right, so we'll make
right, so
sure you
when
do.
we apply for the application, we apply for specific poles on specific routes. And we apply with Verizon and Eversource for the exact same poles,
Mhm.
just different applications, different payments. And then they both send people out separately to survey them.
Yes.
Right, they can't hire
No.
one company, they've got to do their own.
Standard forms that they produce.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody.
Yep.
is the same.
Yep.
Everybody's the same.
Yeah.
So why we just ask it? We don't have any copies. So that we have copies and we know where they're.
Right, we can give you that information. So you'll know, so you'll be able to tie the Make Ready payment to a specific area.
So I was a bit excited that you keep talking about how they're using unions as an excuse to do this, but I'll tell you as a union vice president, like, if my members work, which is some contractor help, like.
I know,
not-
I know, I agree with you, but I don't think they feel a real need to explain to us in any kind of coherent way.
So you get the offer.
Yeah. I mean, so any other questions that people have?
So do you?
Sure.
Totally hypothetical, do you see them approving license in groups, like you apply for licensing? Or will they be, all of a sudden, everything is licensed for the city?
No, it won't be all of a sudden. They're working their way down, which is why we have the north build up at the top.
Okay,
And they will do that. There are other ones where they've finished the survey. There are ones where we've gotten the survey back and gone, we're not paying that. So I mean, it'll be piece by piece.
How many poles approximately do we have GCET here on?
I don't know. I think I said 1,200 and I think that was wrong. I think it's more than that. I think it's
Okay,
probably
so-
closer to 2,000.
And we've got 10 licenses, right?
We have license applications
understand.
in.
But for those 10 licenses that you actually have, how long did it take them to give you those licenses?
So we only have one license for 10 poles.
Right. We have-
And that one walked fast because first of all, it was 10
So a
poles.
license could be multiple poles.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
up to
most
200.
of them, they have to be under a certain amount, under 200. Under 200 poles,
Right.
if you have more than 200, you have to do it in second. So most of ours are somewhere between like 120 and 160. Because we did them geographically,
So then why only 10?
because that was for the fire station.
Right.
Ah,
And that's just.
so going back, now 7 years, whatever it's been.
It's not 7.
um,
We started in 2019. We
You got-
negotiating because you had to do the pole agreements first, and it took almost 2 years to get the pole
So my
agreements.
point is, it's been 5 years, you've got license agreements, right? Or.
We have license applications in that have been in for years. Right.
Mhm.
And are being processed, and it's really slow. I will tell you, Shutesbury got held up because they wanted one pole moved, and it took over a year for them to get them to move one pole. It's really frustrating. It doesn't help us. We'd love to be able to go faster because we'd have a whole lot more customers and we'd make a whole lot more money. And we'd be able to build up our retained earnings, invest in paying off make ready, give money back to the town, which
commissioners.
It doesn't help us at all to have it. Don't like it. But the reality is, I have talked with other general managers, it's just the way it is.
Are there certain conditions that we as GCET, as Greenfield, don't want to meet them and we don't see eye to eye? Or is it just like, hey, there is paperwork that we have submitted and it's just bureaucracy? Or are they coming up with ludicrous, like,
No, it's very slow. There will be upcoming ones where we don't agree, because we have gone through a bunch of them where they say, well, we need a new pole because it doesn't fit. And we say, no, that absolutely fits. You do it this way and you fit, because they just want us to replace that pole.
Yeah.
So we are gonna have areas, shockingly, we're probably gonna argue a lot more in areas where we're already up. But in the core of Greenfield, there are a lot of older poles, and they will say, you need to replace them, and they don't. You have to be 18 feet off the ground, you have to be a foot apart from anybody else in the comm space, you have to be 36 inches below the secondaries, and a lot of the poles are saying they need to be replaced because of size. Absolutely do not. And we're not gonna just pay to just pay, because we don't have the money to do that, and I wouldn't do that anyway. That's them just trying to get us to pay for things that we should.
So maybe I misunderstood, but I thought downtown was already licensed.
No.
Downtown has been wired for, like, I lived downtown.
That's right. It was
And I thought
wired.
you said all the time.
Right, it was, when I started, that was when we sat, and at that point, and I don't think they were trying to be nefarious, they really thought, and because a lot of MLPs in Massachusetts and whatever they're called in other states were at that point, they had lawsuits saying, we have the
that's
right to
okay.
be here. We have the right to do this and we don't have to pay you. And in Connecticut, they won. And then the Connecticut oversight agency came back and said, okay, you're wrong, you're right, you don't have to do anything, you do have to sign this contract. And then the municipalities went, wait, everything we just won, they just put in here, and the regulatory agency said,
So I thought you were talking about like some of the newer build outs, but.
no.
They knew what they knew at that time,
Oh, they knew.
and, well, they knew what they knew at
Right.
that time, and what they knew, or what they believed wasn't what was accurate.
Well, it turned out.
Turned
not
out to be not
And
accurate.
for a while, it looked like they were
right.
And I had started saying in 2019, we should go talk to him, and it didn't look like I was right for a while, but I just really felt like in the end,
You wanted to be wrong.
it would have been great, but Comcast literally has hundreds of lawyers who do nothing with this. There was no way it wasn't going to get appealed. They lobby, there's a lobbyist every day in the state house and in every state house. There was just no way it was not going to be overturned eventually. Unless,
Time wise, in November, you were thinking it might be a couple of months.
yeah,
But Berniston Road, we're just talking about just Berniston Road right now.
Mhm.
The surveys are done,
Mhm.
full licenses are in. Are we gonna be up to 7th Street by when?
I can't tell you because we can't even get them to tell us when they're going to finish the last power transfer on the pole.
So it could be, because it's been a couple of years, it could actually be 5 years. Could it?
I doubt it'll be that long.
Okay.
The really, really long part was the survey where they just, we'd say, is it done? They go, we're working on it. But once it got released to make ready, it's not fast, but it has moved along. I am not going to make any predictions because I've tried in the past and I've been wrong, and I'm not doing it again. So I will.
And that'd be just the kind of stuff that would be.
That'd be exactly.
Right. Right.
It's difficult. It's a difficult problem for me and probably for a lot of people here who represent people.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing, that we come because we represent people, and we represent people in the north part of town, and we represent people in the apartment buildings who
Mhm.
are economically challenged, or the
Yep.
people on my street. And correct me anytime I get the number wrong, but I've had my $45 in for forever. This has never
got it
been a
right.
problem, and you know that.
No, I
It is, we represent people, and I would quibble with the 80 or 84% that are served because of, you know what I'm like, it's not pretty. I think it's probably about, like maybe 65, 70% of the town.
I mean, that's,
What, I know, but I'm just saying.
Okay.
just
We
saying.
can talk about
So-
that. I don't agree, but I understand.
We represent people. And it's difficult. It's difficult, and it's difficult for me as the mayor to say, okay, so
Sure.
when.
Right.
I've wanted this to be successful. I wanted it to be successful from the beginning. But when we see that it's like someone else is in charge of this and not us, could we put, I mean, I think it's probably been like 8.5 million so far, right? With grants and everything else. Well, $5 million bond at the beginning, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It is, and it's like, okay, but we are subsidized, we're not, like for those that have it, we're helping, because it's a wonderful thing if it comes to you. But it's, the question of when is something that many people here represent people in 1 and 9 and many other underserved populations.
We hear it more than anybody. We get calls every day from people saying when. And I cannot in good conscience give a date. I thought I could. I'm sure that was wrong. But at the moment, if we can't get an answer on one power transfer, I don't see how I can say oh, it's gonna be July 15th or September 12th. I don't have
This
the
is-
answer.
This is, you know, and I know people get mad at me for looking at, talking about the past, but you know, it's because of, I've seen this. And in 1999 and 2000, there were 3 households on Adams Road that came to selectmen meetings every other week and saying, when are you going to fund the Millbrook sewer extension? And we'd say, probably never. And that's the reality of it, is that there's more people served by GCET than there are served by sewer and water. Just everybody can buy sewer and water if it goes by their house. Well, they have to. That's a lot. They don't have a choice. So what we've tried to do is, what my response to the people that I hear from all the time, and including my neighbors, is say, the good thing is it's self-sufficient now. It is a positive thing for Greenfield. And at this point now, as was the deal when it was first instituted, you know, from the start, is that the people who are using it are paying for it, and that it's not being subsidized. Just as the people, there's grants that get used for sewer and water all the time, and not everybody gets sewer and water. We don't say, no one says.
But you're coming to the. That's
What do we-
taxpayer money.
What do you mean?
Is that not?
No.
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 We
No.
pay the bonds.
We pay the bonds back.
The ratepayers
The
pay.
bonds, we get the capital bonds, we get our revenue bonds. That means they're paid for by the revenues from GCET.
So what is your relationship with the council? Why do you chose?
By law, the council has the power to approve or disapprove any bond request. That's the most basic.
So you're saying
nature.
no taxpayer dollars actually go to GCET?
Correct.
Currently, no.
Last 2 years.
Really?
And eventually,
That's true, but that over the course of years is probably, because there was a $5 million bond that came from the city, and then there've been many times that capital requests came in, so.
but the capital requests are paid by the ratepayers.
And the bonding was a decision of the city, and not, when I say the city, the community by vote to support GCET, with the full, clear understanding was that for, at minimum, the first 5 years, it had to be paid for with property taxes. There was no other, you either do it that way or you don't do it at all. And with the anticipation of when the build out does occur, the savings one that individuals would see, as well as down the road, the ability for GCET to be an actual revenue stream for the city. That takes time. But there was no other way to do it there was no other way to borrow the money and not have, there was no customers.
And it's not as much as we would like, but we actually do support the city in that the base rate for internet from GCET has never changed. It's much lower than any other surrounding rate. We have added in, I don't even know, Fernando could tell you better than I could, a bunch of VPLS circuits. We don't charge anything for any of that. When the city comes and says, we'd like something hooked up here, we just do it. Because,
Wow, I filled one up by the whole dollar.
yeah, yeah. I will tell you, we're not planning on any internet increase next year. There will be a TV increase because we get increases from the content providers every single year.
Again, I think too, what people want to know is that, because we're getting to understand this now, but if we hear the build up might take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how many years? But then you hear like, you're getting ARPA money, that's federal tax money, it's not city money, but it's still our tax dollars going for this. And so we hear that's gonna pay for the north build out. So, you know, the concern is 4 years from now, is there gonna be money that come back and say, no, we have to do this now, all this happened.
Sure.
You know, you wanna feel like, okay, we're investing in that, we're gonna get the north build out once we get the license, but I don't know that I have total confidence in that.
So here's what I would say. The one thing I can tell you for sure is nobody in this room wants to have certainty more than we do, because we deal with it every single day. We know you get asked. We know, but for us, we have to live with the reality of the situation. We contact them every single week. We don't just sit back and go, oh, hopefully it'll happen at some point. And it is true that once the surveys are done and it's what's called released to construction, things have moved along relatively a faster pace. So I do think that it will happen, but it's incredibly frustrating for us. I know you want it. It's completely reasonable to say, just tell us when, and we just can't do that.
Can I add to this?
Sure.
I'm one of the underserved because I'm stuck with Xfinity, and I just lowered it because the $30 discount for new people is gone. So now I'm doing the essentials thing, and I think I'm having major internet problems. And the FCC did say you cannot have a monopoly. So I just want to make sure that people know the MBI money that's sitting there supposedly waiting for us that we did apply for a long time ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, John, but they're understaffed and we're on a waiting list for God knows how long because they can, like they did it over there in Chelsea. We know that they did it in North Adams, and we're sitting here going, where's our MBI money for the digital equity stuff? And that's also, God only knows when we can either get FRCOG going on this or get our hands on that money because we qualify.
NBI has been as the state decided to push all grants, and there's quite a few. There's GAP grant, there's digital equity, there's residential retrofit, there's BEAD. They decided that NBI would administrate it. If you go, they're actually trying to hire people to help them administrate it. The good news is we do know that there is one location in Greenfield that will eventually be served by the residential retrofit. That information did come out. That's the Weldon. So there is a process you have to go through. You have to score with points, and they take the top 3. I don't even think there's 3 people applying. It's probably us and Comcast. So we will get into the finals, and we will put together the best presentation we possibly can. So
there's no poles on the one side of the building, and yet they could have it on High Street. Like that's the weird thing.
Well, that was shocking saying we won't do that. Remember, we came and said, we can give you service right now. And they said, no, we don't want to do that. We want you to rewire the building. And we said, okay, that can only happen if there's a grant. We talked with Shaka multiple times over the years. Dominica's boss, I can't remember his name right off the top of my head. And they said, no, you can't do that. We don't want those. It's also a historic building. So what the FCC said was there's no
91 Smith Street, sorry, Berkshire. Okay, that man told me when he changes an apartment, he gets to have GCET. And the rest of them, I don't know, like, you know what I mean? That's that little Berkshire, what do you call it? Berkshire apartment?
Smith Street apartment.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's people there and they're stuck with Comcast Xfinity too, apparently. You know, because he's not happy.
That is a really just a cinder block building. That's another reason why we've developed the direct fiber to the premises, because that's a building that, because of the nature of the building, Weldon's the same way. You can't, the idea that you could put, you know, if you look out in the ceiling out there, we have all of our Wi-Fi off the common radio. The Weldon, that's going to work. Never going to work because the whole thing is made out of concrete. So you have to actually go to each individual room, and it's such an old building. New buildings have PVC pipes that you can run all sorts of stuff through. There's nothing like that in the Weldon. The floors don't even match up, so you can't go in the northwest corner and drill all the way down and get all the way from the top to the bottom. So that the cost to do that, it's just got, I mean, I think, you know what I think? It's like the water treatment plant. There would be no water treatment plant in Greenfield if it hadn't been paid for by a grant. There is a common understanding. That's why there are federal grants, because there has been a common understanding for over a century that municipalities on their own cannot afford to build the infrastructure they need. So the grant system, is it great? Not really, because there's an awful lot of hoops to jump through. But we do think that we stand to get a good amount of money And we still have to have the ARPA because if we can't have the poles across the street licensed, then we can't come off them to the building. So we do think that we can work through a bunch of different solutions. But the truth is, think of it this way. You would never think that you could build sewer or water infrastructure without grants. You would never think that. It's never been that way. Internet is infrastructure in exactly the same way. The capital requirements to build infrastructure are beyond the reach of almost all, at least smaller municipalities. It's just true all across the US. That's why there's BEAD. That's why there's ARPA. That's why there are all the different grants, because that's how we've decided to handle it. That federal money will be redistributed because we'd never be able to do it. That's just how it works.
You done talking?
I am never done talking.
So I think, okay. I think what we all want you guys to succeed, because it seems like this is a service that everyone could really benefit.
I agree.
I think and this is one of those things where I genuinely believe that miscommunication and lack of transparency can just breed a host of negative circumstances.
Okay.
And so it's like, and it's also the nature of the service itself. But like, for example, if DPW needs something, right, or the police department needs something, or whatever other department, and you guys are not, but if they need something, it's like, okay, this is what we need, how much we need it for, when will it get done, here we go. And then we have constituents on our back who are obviously like, okay, these are my tax dollars, these are my, my federal tax dollars, whatever it is, and this is what we want.
Right.
The thing with GCET is that there's multiple moving targets, but I think I personally would like to see more cooperation between GCET and the executive, GCET and the city council, and because you guys hear GCET specific things. We hear, why the hell are you taking my money? You shouldn't be taking my money in the first place. Abolish the damn government. Right. I can do my own service, which I can't, whatever.
Not in my face.
Right. Maybe I haven't.
Yeah.
But anyway, we hear that day to day. So I think the way to dispel that is to be as transparent as possible and cooperate as much as you can with the mayor, 2 with the city council. And I mean, you guys have your own messaging with the public.
So let me ask you back. Every time the council has invited me, I've come. So what else would you like to see from us? We had a conversation with the mayor about what the mayor would like to see. What would you like to see beyond what we've done in the
What would be beneficial is, like, for instance, tonight you got the email from Eversource saying they're going to do work in June. Just maybe an update when you get updates.
Okay.
To the mayor and the council.
You know what my first reaction was? Yeah, if that's true.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's been large scale solar projects that have sat down for 2 years waiting on it.
Yeah.
It's nothing.
Yeah,
It's just on me. So, and I think it's kind of an unfair statement what you said. I think this is transitional issues between administrations. So you had a previous administration that might not have required these things from GCET. And now we're in a new transition period where they would like a little more transparency. So now that it's been asked, I think you're doing a good job getting out there and doing what you need to do.
Okay.
You know your expectations,
Yeah.
and we're just going to leave it at that. This was very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I also would, I've sat on the city council for 10 years, and was a selectman for 4 and a school committee for 2. So I've worked with every department. There's operations of this department that go on every day with board meetings, when we have board meetings, but it's the operations, the day-to-day management of GCET operation. Transparency is great. Again, there are things that we do not make public, which is unlike other departments because of the fact that we work against competition with Verizon and Comcast.
If they knew our pricing, they would just undercut us.
Yeah, but as well is that we want to answer all the questions we can, and there's nothing to hide. But I'd ask that you look at GCET just like you look at every other department. And, you know, I think it's great that everyone showed up here. I think this is probably a positive meeting. Probably got more accomplished by not having a meeting than we would have had having a meeting.
Still have to.
Yeah, I know, right. But I know we don't do this with, you know, we don't do this with the DPW. Never, city council does not sit down and go through, tell me where this invoice got sent. That doesn't happen with the DPW.
I think we do.
I don't think you do with operations of the department. I would say with capital expenditures, sure. With projects, major projects, sure. But the day-to-day operations, that doesn't happen. And it never happened. And so I don't want to, you know, inundate Vern and the staff, really, for those types of questions, are those two. He's the tech guy and those two are, and it's great to get the questions ahead of time as well, rather than showing up at a city council meeting and have it come, you know, have it get asked at that point. Send them in, you know, because what looks like what can happen at a city council meeting when a question's asked that maybe John doesn't have the answer right in front of him, or comments are made after the fact, is that the public gets the idea that there's something nefarious going on and or that things aren't working the way they should be. When I think that you can come out of this meeting and say, wow, there's a lot of shit going on. Sorry, this is on TV, but there's a lot of stuff going on. And have a productive and understanding conversation and not a gotcha moment, because I don't think anybody wants that. And we want to show the community that the GCET is a success. GCET is a really good thing, and we want to grow faster than we are right now, because every new customer is only going to help GCET. It's only going to help the community in the long run, and help the people that are using it. Because as you know, I want GCET at 620 Mercy.
Yes.
Is the city bound legally to give the rest of the ARPA funds to GCET?
We think so. We think that it's committed and that there are interested third parties and that the poll agreements are binding contracts. So that is what we believe, and we have a legal opinion to that effect. So I will tell you, outside of that, it would be disastrous not to have it happen, because there would be no North Build. We would end up with make ready that we couldn't pay. So the idea of that money,
like, okay, if that isn't funded, there's a guarantee that Northville won't happen, but if it is funded, there's not a guarantee that Northville will happen.
I wouldn't say that. It's hard because I cannot guarantee. I would disagree with you. I think our track record has been terrific. We've grown exponentially for years. We have, my first year here, we did $2,200 in the first month. We did almost $192,000 in this last month. GCET has grown hugely. I think it comes back to one thing: when. It's totally reasonable that you want to know. I'm going to suggest that I don't think it's reasonable to say, because I can't tell you exactly, that means it's not going to happen. I don't think that's true. I think what we have said is that we feel, from what we've seen, that the construction part is moving faster. But I cannot and will not tell you that I can speak for the end date of the project, because I can't. If that means that you don't think that the ARPA money should be with GCET, well, then we have a legal disagreement, and that happens too. But what I'm telling you is leaving it where it is so we can continue to do what we need to do to answer new questions from a new administration, which we're happy to do. That's in the best interest of everybody. It just is, because it's a service that people really want. And the way to do it is to just recognize that this part stinks. Not being able to hear exactly when things are going to be done stinks. It totally stinks for us too. But it is the reality. Doesn't mean it's never going to happen. We will keep you updated. If I'm skeptical, I'll give you an update that ends with me saying I'm skeptical. But I will do what you are requesting, because it is, you're right, it is a new group, and if we want to have different kinds of communications, we are totally fine with that. We just ask for a little patience. There are not a lot of us, so we can't get everything back to you in 24 hours. Some requests take longer than others, but you can know whatever you want to know. It's fine. If it is something that is really, really trade sensitive, we'll bring you into executive session and tell you in executive session and then make you be bound by that, because we have legitimate concerns. I have a direct statutory responsibility to ratepayers to make sure that we don't screw it up for them. So, but there's nothing you can't know in the proper venue. He raises a good point. The more organized you are in asking, the better and more easily you can answer.
So this might be a can of worms, but so I've been on city council longer than the other folks here. And I've learned that the two worst things about city council is the delays, but you know that there's always delays. The escalations that come from the delays that you know that there are going to be, and you still can't avoid. So I'm wondering, are we worried about the costs escalating? Because if you can't tell, I understand you don't want to say, oh, this is gonna happen on
Right.
July 15th.
Not so much.
But if you can't say like, oh, this is gonna happen before 2030, I'm
No.
imagining escalations.
It will happen.
Everything I voted to fund has been more expensive than what I was originally.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of why we want to put as much retained earnings away as we can. That's why we've applied for all the grants we can. We really are trying to limit the amount of money that the city has to put in. Whether people believe it or not, that's been our goal for years. And we didn't apply for a bond because the city asked us not to last year. So
I think it's smart, you already pre-bought a lot of the material.
Right,
too.
we did.
Material costs, it's
Yeah.
going up exponentially. Labor goes up 1 to 3% a year, depending on.
We saved a lot of, when the COVID started, we sat down and went, oh, we gotta buy this stuff right now. So we did, and it's better to have it sitting around because it was 2 and 3 times as expensive as it was before. Will there be additional costs? Probably. Will it be unmanageable? I don't think so. I'm never going to say to you that we might not come back and say we need a capital bond to finish out this part of it. What I will say to you is we're not going to come to you for a bond that we don't know and aren't sure and can't show you that GCET can handle from ratepayers.
May I address Councilor Manhattan?
Sure.
So you asked about ARPA, but I wanted to clarify that money had been allocated and provided to GCET years ago. When ARPA just happened, or ARPA happened, we would not have started the North Build if we did not have that.
Right.
funding. So it has always been ARPA is going to pay for that. We would, as GCET with ratepayers, not have been able to afford that, and eventually had to go back for capital requests to do any more building because it just cost so much money. So between that and the money that's left is allocated, and most of that is encumbered already to the make ready.
Yeah.
So it's sitting in GCET's bucket. We're just not able to spend it right. Is that helpful?
So without ARPA funding, you would not be able to complete.
Without the remainder, without ARPA funding, we never would have started.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, without ARPA, we never would have started.
Outside of ARPA, approximately how much will you need to complete most?
Well, let's put off ARPA aside. Let's not even consider that. What do you, number wise, what do you need to finish the
To
building?
finish over time,
From now until.
But
the North Build.
right,
I wrote it down, that was in the questions that you asked, and we think it's gonna be $100,000 to $120,000
finished,
more. Yes,
okay.
you, please don't hold me to that as an exact
My
figure.
point is that ARPA money,
Mhm.
and could be other uses for some of that ARPA money. But there's more ARPA money put aside
There is
than-
that
than-
requirement.
that you need in that
No,
number.
that's not true.
That's after the ARPA spending.
Yes.
That it's 100,000 for the North Build. We still have to pay all the make ready for all the other stuff that's up in the floor. The core downtown Greenfield. Everything, we have to pay for the make ready for all the licenses that have been in application phase for years. So it's not like the other licenses will have no make ready, they will.
And I just heard the mayor say, and I've heard all of you over and over again say how important GCET build out is. And in order to do that, the ARPA funding is essential.
Yeah.
So I'd request that, I see that maybe people want to use it for other things that maybe aren't GCET, but really the way to make this go faster, once we have the right to be on the polls up there, is to leave that money where it is, so that we can do the IFBs for labor, for the pole climbers, and we can buy the lights, and we can do that without waiting to make sure that we have enough funds halfway through operational year, or whenever it is, because we do not want to put the money on the taxpayers, right? So we do not want to put money on recap. We want to keep the ARPA funds so that we can go as quickly as we can, as soon as we can.
What we're telling you is it would be whack-a-mole, right? It's not like you could painlessly take that money and spend it on something else. You would put GCET into deficit, and we would either have to stop and then either be lucky enough with the current base we have to build up enough retained earnings to handle the inevitable make ready payments as they come, which I don't think we could do. Or we would have to deficit spend, and it would go on the recap, and it would transfer things. I wrote the mayor in March. You would be transferring expenses from federal grant money to general taxpayers of Greenfield, and we don't think that's a good idea.
So that figure of 100-something thousand is post ARPA funding?
No, the extra 100,000 comes from ARPA to complete the north build, because as we've said, we're not up on the poles itself. We bought all the equipment, we built the LCP building, and we need that to finish. What it doesn't finish is the make ready that's owed over the entire network.
That was the question I had, because when we talk about transparency, when I joined council 4 years ago, this was sold as build out. Just the build out. And conspiracy theories, people start questioning when we're like, oh, it's not really the build out. It's a build out and paying for the rest.
You can't build out without paying for it.
Right, so.
Well, yeah, but let's just.
Right, but we're
real
saying that under $1 million.
It feels misleading, but I get it.
Okay.
It wasn't said we need to also do work on the core. That was never
Well, that's
said.
because it wasn't understood at that time that this was something that needed to be done.
I'm pretty sure that last time I spoke, and last October, I said it at the Ways and Means Committee meeting this year. I said it at the Ways and Means Committee meeting last year. I said that there was additional make ready that needed to happen because of what was previously on the list. So respectfully, I think we have talked about it. I get where you're coming from. I do, but it is the reality of this situation. So that
I'm just saying going forward, I hope we can be as
absolutely
transparent as
sure,
because it's so complex.
It
If
is.
we're going to build any
It is.
support. Public.
I think we have a lot of support.
I would also say that, and I don't know how many people still hold the perception, but your predecessor did not do any favors for the organization. Sorry.
No. Last thing
Can I-
he did was shred us.
You're talking.
I'm not talking about executive session stuff that I'm not gonna repeat. You know what I'm
No, but I'm
talking
saying,
about.
no, you're talking about 2
Dan,
years ago, you're talking about 1 year.
Count.
No, I'm talking about, I wasn't gonna say the name.
I will.
And I think that there are a lot of people who that was their first impression
Mhm.
and it's a lasting impression.
Mhm.
So that means that people want us to be especially eagle-eyed when it comes to, I mean, it's a small town,
It's, I've served on boards for decades. I totally understand where you're.
I think we also have to help them rebrand by putting a little faith in them too.
Yeah,
Like,
but I think that that's
Because our
been happening.
constituents,
Yeah.
if they are skeptical, and we say we met with them, we had an open meeting, they were very open to us, they're gonna be more transparent in the future. It's gonna ease their minds and make their lives easier to do their job, so I
Right.
get you. Seth.
Yeah, and I think.
I will say, any one of you are welcome to make a time to come and we can give you sort of a full dog and pony if that interests you. I know you've got regular jobs and this too, so.
Preferably not on Celtics or Bruins.
Yeah. So we're happy to do that. We can even schedule stuff like this if you want on some like a quarterly basis or whatever you guys think. So what I take away from this is the way that we've communicated with people in the past is not how you want to be communicated with now.
No.
Fine.
Yeah,
That's
because
fine.
I mean, anyone who ran in the last election can tell you one of the top 5 issues that constituents had was what the hell is going on with GCET.
Right.
I don't have it. Why don't I?
Why
have
can't I have it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh, we don't really know. I don't know.
Okay.
What's going on?
So we've done our best to explain to you tonight
Yeah.
what the reality is. If you still feel like you need more or want to hear more, just ask. And I'd be happy to tell you. Okay, it doesn't help us at all to not move forward. It doesn't help us at all to be at odds with you guys. So if you have a question, ask it and we'll answer it.
John, is there anything that can go up on the website where anybody in the city could click and get some information other than they can watch this on YouTube,
So
right?
years ago, we did that. The problem is it inevitably boils down to the same thing. What they want to see up on the website is what day is it gonna get to my house? And that's really the
But you
issue.
just have to explain why we don't know. Other than they
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
sit down
sure,
and
yeah,
watch
sure.
YouTube,
I will
you know,
put
put
something
a
up on the
YouTube
website.
link and say, hey, if you really
Yeah,
want
you
to
can
know.
watch that. I'll put a link to this and we'll put an explanation.
I'm only
I was gonna
saying,
watch it to our meeting.
well, I'm laughing because this is very complicated. Like, this is my second meeting and I'm like,
Yeah,
what am I listening to? What am I doing? Like, try taking, you know, like, this is really complicated stuff,
It is.
which is why we've spent 2 hours here trying to
Mhm.
understand. And
I'd be happy to put an explanation as that
Well, the
doesn't
summary.
make promises we can't keep up on the website. Sure.
Yeah, I think the complexity really adds to the perception of nefariousness, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, it's like everyone here is interested in the best interest of the city. The delays are caused by third parties who do not share those interests. To the extent that it's Verizon, they're somewhat hostile to those interests, and to the extent they're the electric company. And that's the basis of delay. People are not going to want to hear it. They're going to want to point fingers at each other. But it is those guys.
I will say every call that we get for people in your areas that are not serviced, that we are very open in those
Mhm.
conversations and tell them, yes, we have done the application. Yes, we're in the make ready process, you know, and try to explain it in layman's terms so it's not so complicated. You know, some people are very angry about that and other people understand. As soon as you say the polls belong to, they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. You know, so I also welcome public to call and have that conversation
Yeah.
and give us their specific address and their information. And when we get there, we will call them. And I can't wait to make those phone calls.
Yeah.
Cannot
So, is there anything legislatively, is there anything that you would like us to do in our capacity, reaching out to other representatives, state officials, like, hey, we need something? Is there something like that you would like from us?
Let me think about that a little bit. What I'd really like from you is to go out and tell your constituents what you heard tonight. Tell them that if they have questions, they can ask you, they can ask us. We need support. We need for everybody to keep saying that this is a good thing for Greenfield, that this, I will tell you, the people who do have it love it. So I understand why people who don't
I
have it
know.
don't. Yeah. And all of you, I think you actually have the most in your precinct. You have over 400 homes in your precinct that have it. So that I appreciate what we're hearing from you. We will absolutely do everything we can to respond to it. If you think of something else, just tell me. I'm jlunt@gcet.net. Send it to me. If you have something that is upsetting, I want to know that too. So if we need to work together to make sure that there is a perception that we're moving forward in the same direction. And that's really important when the news you give people is disappointing sometimes, which isn't, you can have it tomorrow. I can't tell you that you can have it next week. It is what you can tell them is it is moving forward. Poles have been set. Power has been transferred. Things in the make-ready construction are actually happening. We will try to keep you as appraised as we can. I actually think this is a better venue because when I come and try to talk, think about trying to tell you guys all this at a council meeting where you really want me to talk for about 5 minutes. And it's just impossible because there is such a lot.
I'm actually happy that the piece turned out the way it did, showed up.
Excellent. So.
Now let's change our rules of procedure. Department heads get to speak for 5 minutes. John Lott gets to speak for 3 hours.
You know I can. It just is. I actually think it's a lot more. The only other thing that's as complex is some of the stuff, which is also very complex.
You can also do it.
He can. Maybe that's due to the subject and not the people. Oh no, I'm sorry. That's not true. It's due to. So, all right. So I appreciate it. But our door's open if you want to talk to us more. We do have to talk about grants. Part of that has to be an executive session. If you want to stay, you can be in the executive sessions, but it's something that has to stay in executive session.
Well, thank you for this.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you all coming.
Yeah.
3 games next year for us.
Yeah.
You're doing this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
She was.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, folks. No, we're not. I will stop the recording.
So call to order.
You have to call it to order, and then you have to tell people that we'll be coming out of executive session only to adjourn.
Right. Okay, so it is 8:45, 8:14, I mean, 8:14. We'll call the meeting to order. Any public comment?
Public comment?
Oh, yeah. Any public comment? Stephanie, Ryan? Nothing?
Okay.
Nothing right now.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we did the Northfield update and city council communication. Well, we did that.
Yeah.
Uh,
We've covered in the conversation, the meeting with the
Our
mayor
meeting with the mayor, MBI grant,
is what we will cover to executive session.
we gotta go to the executive session. So, we will be going into executive session for the reason number 10 to discuss trade secrets for confidential, competitively sensitive or other proprietary information. So we would need to do this. We will go into executive session. When we come out, we will adjourn. So we need to have a roll call vote to go into executive session, motion and a roll call.
I move we go into executive session.
Second.
Yeah, second.
David, yes.
Yes.
Dan, yes. And I'm a yes. Okay, so we are in executive session.
So now I'm going to pause recording and